Cheers, Rockets fans. Welcome to The Locker Line, an exclusive podcast from the home of the Rockets.
Whoa!
Sports Talk 790.
Rockets!
The Locker Line is proudly served to you by Carbox Clutch City Lager.
It is good! Oh, yeah?
Red Nation, get ready. Get ready. The Locker Line starts now.
Welcome aboard.
Welcome in to another new episode of The Lager Line, served to you as always courtesy of Clutch City Lager of Carbox Brewing. I'm your host, Ben DuBose, editor of USA Today's Rockets Wire and contributor to Sports Talk 790, the official flagship radio station of your Houston Rockets. On today's show, as we look ahead to the upcoming regular season, I'm thrilled to welcome back Craig Ackerman, play-by-play voice of the Houston Rockets on all television broadcasts via AT&T SportsNet Southwest. Craig, thanks for taking the time. How are you?
Thanks for having me on. I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Cannot complain, especially after the Astros just went up 2-0 in the ALDS before we started this recording. Craig, I know you were a former baseball player. Any thoughts on the Astros, and in particular one man named Yordan Alvarez?
Well, my thoughts on the Astros is that they're a machine. Obviously, the level of success that they've had over the last half dozen years or so has been incredible. It's a really well-run organization. And the fact that the Astros continue to play at this level and aren't like crazy over-the-top spenders like the Yankees and the Dodgers and the Red Sox, it's pretty remarkable. And quite honestly, their player development is got to be the best in the big leagues. I mean, every time somebody who's been a key player for them moves on for whatever reason, they have somebody waiting in the wings, ready to take over. Their pitching development especially seems to be world class. And I don't see any signs of them slipping or slowing down anytime soon. They are a remarkable franchise, a franchise that went through 3 really horrific seasons to get to this point. But obviously that pain was well worth it. And Yordan Alvarez, man, this guy is an absolute masher.
Yes, absolutely. And to your point on the pitching development, it's easy to get frustrated by the excess walks today, but the reality is Framber Valdez in a playoff game that you really needed to win gave you nearly 6 innings, which is almost unheard of in this era of baseball, where in the postseason starters get taken out after 3, 4, 5 innings like it's nothing. Gave you nearly 6 innings of 2-run ball and gave you a shot to win. And combine that with Yordan Alvarez doing what he does, and all of a sudden you're up 2-0 in the ALDS for a 6th straight year, which is absolutely insane. Anyway, as far as the Rockets and today's show, in addition to Craig, we're also welcoming back Paulo Alves to the show, who our audience at the Lager Line should be pretty familiar with already. We've had him on as an analyst at least twice, and in my opinion, he's one of the best young content creators out there when it comes to the Rockets. With that in mind, I'm thrilled to announce that not only is he back on the show today, but he's also now a co-host and producer of the Lager Line moving forward. So you're going to be hearing a lot more from him. Paulo, welcome back. Congratulations on your quasi-promotion. How's life in Portugal, my friend?
It's very good. I'm also an Astros fan, so this is very emotional time that we're recording at. But yeah, pleased to be here. It's a pleasure to record with you, of course, and I look forward to above everything producing good content and making this a learning experience.
Absolutely. And to give our listeners a peek behind the curtain, Craig and I are recording at 7 p.m. Houston time. Paulo's recording at 1 a.m. in Portugal. But I think that's where the Astros game comes into play. It gives you some nice adrenaline going into this, to where I'm pretty sure Paulo's pretty wired right now. He's not, you're not feeling too tired, are you, man?
Jeremy Pena is the best shortstop of all time.
Yeah, God, his first 2 games, I mean, it's been incredible, because what he's done is offset. I don't want to say nothing from Jose Altuve, because he has given you some incredible defense. But offensively, I think you can see the rust after a week off for Altuve, but it really hasn't affected the Astros, because Pena's picked up the slack and he's gotten on base in front of Yordan. And of course, the rest is history. We know what.
Yeah, look, that's baseball, man. That's baseball. Yep. I mean, sometimes guys go a couple, 3 games and don't hit, but the Astros just have just tremendous depth and it just seems like every year somebody new, somebody different steps up. They're a machine. I mean, that's really the only, to me, that's the most apropos way to describe their organization. They're just a machine. And again, they don't do it. They're not spending $300 million on their payroll. So yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah, as someone put it, I was listening into Mariners fans' reactions. As someone put it, you can walk Yordan Alvarez. You can walk. You'd have to walk basically 2/3 of the lineup, because until you get to Martin Maldonado, you're not really catching a break.
Yep. That's true. And Yuli picking it up in the postseason. I know he didn't have a hit today. He did have 3 in game 1, but you can just see the quality of at-bats. That's gone a long way towards lengthening the lineup. And Dusty made the obvious adjustment after Trey Mancini really struggled in game 1, going to Aledmus Diaz today. Diaz had a key double, although didn't score. It's just one of those things that really stresses out as you're getting at the opposing pitching staff and manager, to where really, other than Maldonado, and even Maldonado, he didn't have a hit today, but he really had some good swings as well. It's just really, when they get to the postseason, you can tell when that lineup dials up the intensity, even against a great pitcher like Luis Castillo, they just know how to really stress out the other team. And over 9 innings, that tends to sort of have a cumulative effect, and eventually you break through. It might take until the 9th inning like it did in game 1, but eventually you break through. Anyway, turning back to hoops, and again, I want to give a shout out to Paulo. For anyone wondering the rationale, the bottom line, when we started the Lager line, myself, Sports Talk 790, Carbach Brewing, it started as an interview show during the off season to get people through sort of the 5 or 6 months without Rockets basketball. If we're going to continue this into the regular season, we need more than a one-man band to give this team the coverage it deserves. And the bottom line, on Rockets Twitter, there's no one that I would rather partner with, really beyond Rockets Twitter. I'd say just Rockets online media content creation. There's no one I'd rather partner with than Paulo. If you aren't already following him on Twitter, I urge you to do so at Paulo Alves NBA. In my opinion, he's got a really insightful basketball mind. He knows the ins and outs of team building in the NBA. And most importantly, in my opinion, Paulo, you're really fun to listen to. You're a great guy as a person. So I'm really excited about that. And with that out of the way, Craig, you're our guest, so let's spin this back to you. We're recording this Thursday night. You guys, you and Ryan Hollins are doing game prep for Friday's preseason finale broadcast of Rockets Pacers, which will be not on AT&T SportsNet Southwest, but on Rockets.com and the Rockets app. Big picture through 3 exhibitions, 2-1 as we're recording this for the Rockets. Have you seen anything so far that materially changes your outlook for this team relative to your expectations before training camp started?
You know, I would probably say no, but what I've noticed that there's a different sort of vibe and buzz with this group this year than at this point a season ago. We've seen the vision, the direction of where this was going, starting a couple of years ago after the All-Star break, when they started committing to playing all of the young players. Then obviously with the draft headline by Jalen Green and Alperen and everything that took place last season. But this is sort of like, last year was the ground floor. This is one step up in terms of this rebuild. And there's a lot of young talent on this team to be excited about. I will take a wait and see approach to see how ultimately that plays out when it comes to wins and losses, even though, again, I don't think that this season, much like last season, really is about that. It's about, is this team and are these individual players better at the end of the season than they were at the start of the season? Then I would consider the season a success, because typically, very often, as you guys well know, youth and inexperience doesn't win very often in the NBA, and the Rockets, again, have a lot of that. But they got a lot of players who've got great mentalities, tons of talent, and at least to this point, had a good training camp. Obviously, the Miami game in that second quarter, things got away after the great start. Was a little felt like more preseason-y than some of the other games. But no, I mean, we'll see. I mean, I don't look. If you're asking me, do I expect this to be a playoff team this year? No, I don't. But if they can inch their way up and push for a play-in spot, then obviously I think this group will be ahead of schedule from where I think most people were expecting to be. And that would be a good thing because that would mean multiple guys would have taken that next step forward. So I'm just excited to watch the season play out and watch these guys develop individually and as a team and see if they can improve some of their weaknesses from a year ago. I think it's just going to be fascinating because there is so many really, really good young players on this roster.
Yeah, for sure. And to add to what you said, I think we saw in preseason a lot of what we'll see during the season that's going to lead to losses. Usually with young teams, you draft a lot of offensive firepower, and usually it takes a few years to add on defensive talent like Jabari Smith, like Tari Eason. And they managed to do that in one draft. So I think that's a really good step forward. But at the same time, you're still going to have games where Alperen Sengun, who's a very unique player on the defensive end, is going to be too much of a mismatch, and he's going to lose you games sometimes. Sometimes Jalen Green, while he has bulked up, sometimes he's not going to be able to hold his own against his first matchup. Another thing that people are not really bringing up, is the Rockets shot lights out from three so far in preseason.
Yes.
And one thing that you can expect out of a young team is inconsistency, especially on that as well. They added a three-point sniper in Jabari Smith, but he's not going to single-handedly bring your team shooting up that much. So although we saw a lot of exciting things, it's too early to tell. And there's too many variables that went right so far, though I don't know if they're going to go right heading into the future. But picking back up on something I said, the Sengun, he obviously didn't play the second game, right? But that third game, there was a lot of talk on Rockets Twitter about how he was used. What John Lucas said after the game about how he was going to be used. Most people see Sengun as someone who's best as an offensive hub that is going to lose a little bit on the defensive side of the ball, but you kind of expect him to make that up, at least early in his career, on the offensive end. And we didn't see him used as an offensive hub much in that last game. What do you think of how he was used and how he's going to be used moving forward in order to be able to offset any deficiencies that he might have on the defensive end?
Well, obviously he struggled against Miami. There's no question about that. I don't know. Perhaps maybe some of that had to do with, again, they weren't playing their frontline guys, but their defensive scheme has been a pretty darn good one for quite a while. What I can tell you is that he was sort of the hub throughout training camp, right? They were playing through him. I expect that to be more of the same. They want their guards to move, namely Porter and Green. They want them to be able to operate in space and be able to attack downhill because that's when they're at their best. And Sengun is obviously very good in making reads and terrific passes and so on and so forth. So I think we'll continue to see more of him being used in that fashion. I mean, he just had a bad game. It happens. But he's also, you also have to realize that scoring options 1 and 2 on this team are Green and Porter. I think that's probably the way it should be. So it's just, again, it'll just be sort of a feeling out process. He's starting with that group as opposed to coming off the bench a season ago. So there'll be some adjustments there, but he was sort of the hub during training camp. And I would not let one game sway anybody's opinion too drastically one way or other. I think he just had a poor game, and the way Miami just sort of clogs and surrounds the paint can make things a little bit difficult. So I wouldn't overreact from one bad game from Alp.
Yeah, and to me, I think a lot of people are overreacting because it's easy to forget that it's the same exact sample as the San Antonio game, just one game in which he really was the hub. If you think back to early in that San Antonio game, it really felt like the offense ran through Sengun even more than it did Jalen or KPJ. And it sounds like from what you're saying that the San Antonio game is much more comparable to what you saw in the camp practices in terms of the style of offenses that they want to run, the style of offensive sets that is, than the Miami game. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I mean, I would say so. But look, you're always going up against some other players and some other team, right? And Miami has basically been a group that their defensive philosophy, especially over the last couple of years, is that they're not going to concede very many paint opportunities, right? And so, you know, if it's hard to cut for guys off the ball and so on and so forth, it can be kind of a little bit difficult to kind of get things going. But I like Sengun. I'm very high on him, very bullish on his talent. And again, I don't overreact positively to things you see sort of in the preseason, and I'm not going to react to things negatively as well. Remember, it's a long year, and this is still generally speaking about, are these players individually and as a collective, are they better at the end of the season than they were at the start? And then ultimately, I think that's where these individuals and the team will be judged.
Yeah, that's fair. And we should note, by the way, that you were without Jabari Smith Jr. and for the most part without Jayshawn Tate. He played the first 6 minutes or so before leaving with ankle soreness. And those are two of your better off-ball cutters. So that may have played a role in terms of how it functions, the offense, or doesn't function with Sengun as the hub. That could be a role as well. As a quick follow-up to the Sengun discussion, I forget what interview it was, Craig, but you were on someone's show fairly recently, and you mentioned that a year ago, Sengun was the best player they had in camp, which I'm sure was absolutely
it was obvious, yes.
Which was stunning, given that he was 19 years old at the time and an NBA rookie. Now, granted, he did play professionally in Turkey, which is more advanced than the pre-NBA experience for a lot of those guys a year ago. Did you feel the same way this year, or now that Jalen's in year 2, and of course Jabari played a year of high-level college basketball in Auburn, was Sengun still clearly the best player in camp, or was it closer to parity relative to a year ago?
No, it was much closer to parity.
Okay.
Jalen Green was really good at those practices. I thought Jabari Smith looked good as well. I thought KJ Martin played extremely well too. But no, it was very obvious that he was incredibly talented the first time I watched him practice a year ago down in Galveston. If you're asking me, do I think does that mean that he's taken a step back? No. I just said, just my observations from the Galveston training camp as opposed to the Lake Charles training camp is that he was just tremendous. And obviously I didn't know a whole lot about the guy coming in, and just watching him play, he looked like a veteran player out there. He's got a very high basketball IQ. But no, I mean, they said Jalen. I mean, going into the Miami game, the coaches mentioned that the day before the Miami game, Jalen Green might have had the best practice that he had ever had in a Rockets uniform. They said he was absolutely spectacular. I wasn't there, so I didn't see it firsthand. But they mentioned that he was so good in practice going into that Miami game, and obviously he was spectacular. He and Kevin in that first quarter against the Heat. So I don't know if it means everybody's caught up to the way Sengun looked in the first couple of practices a year ago, or it's just that just happened to be happenstance then. But yeah, he absolutely stood out a year ago in Galveston.
Yeah, and speaking of players who have stood out so far in preseason, there's just one name you can't miss, and that's Tari Eason, right? This guy got picked at 17. Rockets fans had a lot of trouble figuring out who they wanted at number 3, but who they wanted at number 17 was very clear cut since way too early in the draft process. And the guy's Tari Eason. And he has been incredible so far. There were questions about his shot. He's shot pretty well in preseason. He's someone who just goes out there and gets stuff done without needing to be set up, basically. I guess my question becomes, how long will they be able to, not give Tari Eason a really prominent role? Because if we're being honest, he has looked really good so far, but there's a lot of guys ahead of him that play the same position in that pecking order. How long do you think, how old can you until Tari Eason just, rips those minutes away, kind of like what Sengun did last year?
And I guess to a lesser extent, Josh Christopher. I mean, at the start of the season, he wasn't even thought about being part of the rotation, and he sort of just bullied his way into it. I think Tari has reached that point a lot sooner this season than a year ago. I mean, I think they have to carve out minutes for him. And I've said on multiple platforms and interviews over the last month or so, to me, and I think the picture is a little more clear now than it was 2 weeks ago about, okay, they have coming into training camp, I thought that they had, in essence, 13, 14 guys who could make a case as to why, and obviously the why can mean different things for different players, as to why they should be seeing minutes in the regular rotation. But as we've seen these 3 games shake out, I think that it's sort of zeroing in on a group of 10. I personally don't know how effectively you can run a 10-man rotation in the NBA. It's happened before, but it's rare because what you're doing is if you're playing somebody at the back end of the rotation, of that 10-man rotation, so to speak, then you're taking minutes away from somebody who you want to be playing more. And again, I think this will kind of we'll find out where they kind of sit in terms of how important is continuing to win, to build that kind of culture, because winning is important, because when you consistently lose, you develop bad habits, versus a true sort of focus on player development. But I think based on what he showed in the summer league, and B, has demonstrated in practices and training camp, and then obviously in these 3 games already in the preseason, that Tari Eason absolutely should be part of the Rockets rotation, and they need to find a way to carve out some minutes for him. I think he's already bullied the coaches into that. We'll have to see how much that ultimately is when they start playing games for real next week, but I personally certainly think he's deserving of it.
When we talk about those 10, another member of the opening day rotation that's really surprised me in the preseason with how seamless of a fit he's been is KJ Martin. You mentioned him earlier, and some of the minutes he's played on the wing in the preseason have been out of necessity because Eric Gordon's missed a couple of games and Jayshawn Tate's been in and out with some ankle issues. So there haven't been as many wing minutes or I should say there's been fewer wing players. There's been more wing minutes to fill than you would have thought with the roster going into the preseason. But we heard throughout the summer that Garrison Matthews looked really good in some of the workouts. And
he did look very good. He did.
And there were also some reports about KJ potentially looking elsewhere, being uncertain about his role long-term after they drafted 2 forwards in Jabari Smith and Tari Eason, and both Jabari and Tari have looked really strong in the preseason. Of course, Jabari played the 1 game, but he looked really good in it. So for KJ to be a fit long-term, clearly he's got to play at least some at the 3, have more wing skills. And yet, despite not doing that a ton the last couple of years, it feels like he's already ahead of Garrison Matthews, even though Garrison had a strong offseason, as you just said. And it feels like KJ is ready for wing minutes day 1, barring, an injury or something unforeseen. Are you surprised, Craig, by just how good KJ looks? I suppose not just as a player, but in somewhat of a different role relative to where he's played at the 4 and even the 5 his first 2 years in the NBA.
Honestly, no. You know what? He's somebody who's in his time here. It seems like anything they've asked of him. I've always been bullish on KJ Martin, always since I saw him play. Obviously, his athleticism is off the charts good, and he makes for incredible. And as a result, the fan experience with KJ Martin is tremendous because he's such an explosive athlete. But everything they've asked him to do, he seems to have excelled in it. He's a great guy, works very hard, and obviously he's what did he shoot last year? I don't have it in front of me. Was it 36%?
36%
from 3. So far in the preseason, I mean, look, he's not going to be a high volume 3-point shooter, but he's at 46%. He's made 5 of his 11 threes so far in the preseason. If he can be a reliable 36%, which is right around league average 3-point shooter, and then his ability to get out and run and fill lanes, and with his athletic ability, to keep people in front of him, then he should be playing. I like him. I've always liked him. Again, I don't know what's in his head in terms of all the rumored stories and so forth about a potential trade with him. But
he's just there to do his job, Craig.
When I've been around him in the team context, he seems really happy to be here and very happy with what he's doing and with this team. And so that's all I can go by. And again, I'm not surprised. Everything they asked of him, he seems to do well.
As a very quick follow-up to that, when we were in the locker room pregame on Friday, he seemed very happy with his teammates. So happy. He was talking about going to Target on Saturday to get kitty backpacks for Jabari, Tari, and Tai on the road trip. Did you know if that actually happened?
I did not see it when we went to Miami. I did not travel with the team to Indianapolis because the game, as you mentioned earlier, is not technically something that will be televised. Ryan and I will be doing it out of a studio at Toyota Center on Rockets.com and the Rockets app. So I don't know. I don't know if Jabari did not go to Miami. I don't know if he was. Or
that's
was
a good point.
On the team plane, since I wasn't there. Yeah, I have no idea.
Okay. Yeah, he was very enthusiastic about that, which did not strike me as something that a guy would do if he was unhappy. He wanted those kitty backpacks, and he was willing to drive to Target himself to get it, which I thought was a really good sign.
Paulo, season for him. He's a grizzled vet with this group.
Yes, 21 years old, year 3, grizzled vet.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Besides Eric Gordon, he is who's been here the longest, along with Jay Shante. And that's kind of crazy to realize. He's still one of the youngest guys. He came in out of IMG Academy, if I'm not mistaken. Really young. He still has team control for a couple more years, and it really puts the coaching staff in a predicament because, and personally looking at it, you've got the starting 5. You've got KPJ, Jalen, Eric Gordon, Jabari Smith, and Alperen Sengun. Those are basically untouchable. You've got Jason Tate, who's basically untouchable as well. And then we're trying to give minutes to KJ Martin and Tari Eason. And so that's one wing too much. And you've got to, I think there's 2 more ingenious ways you can go about it. I think you can just not play a center and you stagger Jabari Smith a little bit and you play him as the backup center like they did in Summer League. Or you don't play a backup point guard and you rely on Jason Tate's playmaking potential, which he has showcased this preseason as well, to maybe carry you a little bit. Combine that with maybe if you're playing no point guard, maybe you stagger a little bit more between KPJ and Jalen or even Sengun to give you some playmaking. But it's a really tough position to be in because even we know Garrison Matthews is someone who's worked really hard in the preseason or in the offseason, so you want to reward that. And even Bruno Fernando, he earned an actual contract when he could have stayed on a 2-way and he would have still been in team control, right? And if he's earned that contract, it means that he's worked, and we've seen reports of, he's been really good. So it's a really tough balance to strike as a coaching staff and it's a good problem to have, but at the same time, is it really? My question would be, so a lot of people projected Tari Eason to play in the G League to start the season. We've basically already taken it as fact that Tai will start there. At what point, considering how much of a problem you have with rotations, how many minutes would you say Tari Eason has to play with the main guys for it to be worth more than playing 30 minutes a night with the G League? With the Vipers, who are known to be, great at development as well.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to see any time in the G League, much like when I saw Sengun last year. I would be surprised if Eason spends any time in the G League. That's a good question. I mean, I would expect, he'd probably play somewhere in the neighborhood of just off the top of my head, 15 or 18 minutes on average. Mm-hmm. Look, Jason Tate is going to probably play near starters minutes, so he's probably going to be in and around 30 minutes. when he's healthy. Then you have the frontline guys, and then obviously you have to, the sort of the unknown here are, as you guys have brought up, some of the matchups with Sengun. Can he stay out of foul trouble? Because that was an issue last year. Then where do you go? Do you want to play more of a, even though Fernando isn't a traditional big, but do you want to play more of a rim running, screen setting big in Fernando, or do you go back to Jabari Smith? But I do agree with your point, Paulo, that I think the latter of the two scenarios, and I thought this going in, and I'm more convinced of it now, will be I think they're going to go without a quote unquote true backup point guard. I think they're going to allow Jae'Sean Tate to be a facilitator quite often with that second unit. And perhaps maybe we'll see some more staggering of Green and Porter to facilitate some of that playmaking skill. Josh Christopher can do it, but turnovers were a problem for this team. They've been a problem so far in the preseason. I don't know if that's something that they, if they have to go to in a pinch, they want to be something they want to lean in on. But I do think that ultimately they're going to ask in their second unit, provided that Sengun's not on the floor, that Tate's going to be sort of that secondary facilitator for that group. And I think that's where things will start to get very interesting for this team, because as we saw right off the bat in Miami, Green and KPJ are tremendously talented scorers. And I think both are going to have really big years, much like we saw at the tail end of last season, and especially what we saw in the last 7 games of last season when Christian Wood and some of the other vets were sat down, and it's kind of reset the scoring hierarchy. I think those two guys are going to have really, really big seasons. It's that second unit, and a lot of that was sort of captained a year ago by Sengun. But if he's not going to sort of captain that second unit, they're going to have to rely on Jae'Sean Tate. And so I think creating quality offense with that second unit is going to be something that will be pretty interesting to watch unfold as the season gets underway.
I want to circle back to KPJ quickly, because you touched on Jalen earlier in the podcast, and I think a lot of people going into year 2 look at Jalen's development as linear, because he was picked number 2 overall. This is year 2. He finished with a historic scoring burst, efficient in doing so at the end of last year, and people are bullish on him with good reason. Yet KPJ is a guy, it's flown a little bit under the radar. People know he's up for an extension, and we'll see if that gets done. There's a few days left until the deadline, which is a day or two before the season starts. That's Monday or Tuesday of next week. We'll see if something comes together. But regardless, this is year 4. It's a contract year for him. And this is the point of an NBA prospects development cycle, where a lot of times guys start to be what they are. It's not about development. By the time you're 22 years old and going into your 4th year in the league, I'm not going to say there's no growth from that point forward, but you're much closer to getting to your peak. And for KPJ, it's not only year 4, but it's also year 2 for him as the starting point guard. Comparing what you've seen in training camp a year ago to what you've seen this year, is KPJ in a much better place going into this season than he was this time a year ago?
You're talking about in terms of where he is mentally?
Well, no, just as a player. In terms of being able to go out and perhaps have a step forward this year relative to what he did last year in basically year 1 as a starter and year 1 as a point guard for the Rockets.
Well, I think a lot of that maturation actually took place last year with him sort of manning that position full time for a full season. I think it's going to be more of a continuation from what we saw from him the second half of last year, and especially at the tail end. I think this is the kind of player he's probably going to be more nights than not. I think they want to get him more involved in catch and shoot situations, obviously based on what he was able to do a year ago at over 48%. In there. So perhaps maybe they'll start to play him off the ball a little bit more, as we talked about with Sengun as sort of the hub. But I think it's going to be more of the same. I don't know if he's necessarily different now per se than he was a year ago and so on and so forth. I just think he's got a lot of talent too. And he's got to limit the turnover. He's got to be a little bit more of a consistent decision maker with the ball. But I think that the system, the way they have things, he's going to be set up for a continuation from what we saw in the second half of last year, which is a ton of points. He's a real good passer, unselfish player in that regard. I think he's going to have a big year.
Yeah, love me some KPJ love. He's someone who's really polarizing amongst Rockets fans, either because of being a point guard or because how inconsistent he was last year. But he's someone who's really easy to root for.
And I will, by the way, I will point out that he has finished better in the preseason. When he went into the offseason, he talked about wanting to get back to his first couple of years in the NBA as a finisher, because last year he took the big jump as a shooter, shot 38% on threes, 99th percentile in catch and shoot, but it really didn't show in the overall numbers because he took a step forward in shooting, but he took a step back in finishing. Maybe some of that was randomness. Some of it, he had the quad injury that he dealt with throughout the year after getting, or especially for the first 2/3 of the year, really until the All-Star break after he got kneed by Draymond Green early in the season. He talked in the offseason. I asked him when he, right before the preseason opener, and he said that his shirts were fitting differently. They put on weight in the offseason as part of a plan to finish better. There was a couple of plays in the Miami game where he really showed that. So if he maintains the shooting ability and now is stronger and can finish, then that's the recipe for a much more complete offensive player. I know you're going somewhere else with that, Paulo, but I just wanted to sort of close the loop on KPJ and what the case for optimism is on him going into this season.
Yeah, for sure. That's always going to be interesting because he seemed so good, so crafty at finishing his first half a season here. And then it completely dropped off. And hopefully now it's back because you need both. You need to, it's the 1-2 punch that makes you so scary as a scorer. And I will say, I think the process for KPJ, these first few preseason games has been a lot more solid than he was last season. Last season he'd get lost dribbling, he'd get lost. The sets wouldn't provide the advantages that he was expecting, and he'd just stagnate into a step back three. I think the process has been a lot better for him. But my question, the other thing I wanted to talk about is shifting from the top of the lineup to the bottom of the lineup. The Rockets have a real big problem when it comes to roster spots because you can only have 15 guys, and I'll spare everybody the having to read all the names. It basically boils down to a choice between one of these guys has to go. Either Derek Favors, who they traded for his big salary that is useful in trades down the line. There's Boban, who's a fan favorite. And then you've got Garrison Matthews, who seemed to have a clear spot in the rotation, but we're not sure anymore. And you've got Tayshaun Nix, who I know they're really high on, but at the same time, if you have Ty Washington there and he is an actual first-round pick, and he's going to the G League, and you're even still, you're probably going to play Jason Tate as that de facto point guard. One of Boban, Favors, Nix, or Matthews has got to go before the start of the season. And I think it's a really tough decision because you just traded for Favors for that contract. Boban
and he's also and Favors is also a leader like Boban too. Let's be clear about that. They're both veteran presences.
For sure, and he's been he was on the Thunder last year. He's used to being on bad teams, and he can play still. That's still someone who, if you need him to play, he can play. You've got Boban, who's that vet experience, but he's also so entertaining for the fans. I'm not sure if that ever crosses the front office's mind when it comes to marketability or whatever. You've got Matthews. I think my head currently lies at waiving Matthews, which is it's really tough. I wonder what y'all think about that.
Yeah, it's tough. Matthews is certainly not played well in the preseason. He's there to make shots, and he hasn't made very many of them. If you asked me 6 weeks ago, I would have told you that. That's why I think that things have sort of changed now that we've got to watch the group. I would have told you that he's playing. He's absolutely 100% part of the rotation. Now I'm not so sure if he's necessarily part of the rotation with sort of the emergence of Tari Eason and I guess we're talking about KJ's been very good. So, but I do think ultimately that there is a focus on floor spacing and shooting. I think it would be tough, honestly, to just let somebody like Garrison go. I don't know what they're thinking. It is an extremely difficult decision. You mentioned that there are, obviously with Boban, and they have so many bigs on the roster as is. it would crush me if he were somebody that was let go, but it would certainly be understandable. You made the argument, but he is such an attraction and a fan favorite everywhere he is. His teammates already, he is the world's greatest teammate. And so I think there is something to be said for that and a roster spot for him. Obviously, Derek Favors just got here, and he made a strong case as to how important his contract potentially is for further moves on down the line. It's going to be a tough decision. I mean, obviously there's still some time left to make a deal to sort of, release the pressure on this particular decision. I would be very surprised if Daisha Nix, would be someone that they would part ways with as of right now. He's still a super young player. I think they probably still want to see a little bit more from him, but I never thought that he would see a ton of minutes at the NBA level this season anyway. I always thought that he would probably play more for the Vipers than he would play for the Rockets, especially if you look at the way that you have so many people in front of him, even if the team desperately sort of needs or could use a secondary playmaker. I never really thought that he was going to be part of that rotation, but I would be surprised if they ended up giving up on him at this particular point. Yeah, right. It's a tough decision. I don't know what direction they're going to go in. Typically, you don't throw away players who have sizable or reasonable mid-tier expiring contracts like Derek Favors. So we'll obviously have to wait and see how this plays out. But it's a tough decision, much like it is. Okay, who are they playing and how many minutes? They have. Yeah. There's a lot of tough decisions as we get ready. We're on the eve of the start of the regular season.
The one thing that I'll add is to consider what happens with the waiver wire as well, because on the eve of last season, it's when they actually got Garrison Matthews when he was waived, I believe, from Boston, and then the Rockets got him onto a two-way deal, and that could play into it as well, because the Rockets, of course, after having the worst record last year, they're at the front of the waiver wire line. And so if you could get someone that you like on a two-way that has a similar role to, say, Garrison Matthews or Daisha Nix or one of your bigs, then that might make the decision easier if you have a replacement on a two-way that you see as being of comparable ability. So some of this is sort of dependent on the outside market as well, because I think Rafael Stone, it's pretty clear they're going to go best player available. And in terms of who they could potentially get via the waiver wire for a two-way deal, the same way they did with Garrison a year ago, that might play into this as well. If you could potentially use that to have a, don't want to say a dollar store version, because that would be underselling whoever they get, but you know what I mean, a potential replacement, that would go into the calculus as well. So some of it is to be determined. Anyway, as we wind down, I want to shift gears to the broadcast changes, because Craig, you do have Ryan Hollins back. It's different than last year when you were going from Matt Bullard to Ryan, and I know that was a really big shift for you. And actually, last year was your first as the full-time play-by-play, right?
Yeah, on TV, yes.
Right, yes. So there's more continuity for you, but you do have a shift with Vanessa Richardson replacing Kaylee Griffin. And of course, Kaylee did a great job over her 3 years, but Vanessa has done great work this year in her studio gig. Following the Astros. Of course, she's been both a TV and a radio voice here in Houston the last 3 years. How are things going with that transition, and what do you see in Vanessa potentially adding to this team as we go forward?
Well, she's kind of hit the ground running. I thought through 2 games, she's done a really good job. Basketball is kind of in her blood. She's from Indiana. And so that's, it's basketball country up there for sure. Obviously has, as you mentioned, the local experience already, the familiarity with the team already. I think she's done a terrific job. And her role is going to be focused on presenting the stories of a lot of these players, and Ryan and our job is to obviously call the nuts and bolts of the game, but we're happy to have her. Obviously we miss Kaylee, as you're correct. She did a tremendous job over 3 years, but this was an opportunity for her, both personally and professionally, that was something that was hard to pass up, and obviously she didn't pass it up. So we're going to miss her, but wish her all the best. But I think Vanessa's going to be terrific coming in right behind Kaylee. Again, she's got a very open, fun kind of personality, which to me is always kind of like one of the most important traits for me when you're watching or listening to something. You want engaging, upbeat, fun, energetic personalities. And so I think with that, she'll sort of slide right in with Ryan and I, who Ryan actually might have more energy than me, which was something I had to get used to a year ago because I have a ton of energy, and it took me a little while frankly, I had to back off a little bit because I think he had more than I did. But through the 2 games that Ryan and I have worked so far, it feels like we were in mid-March last year. It took a couple of months for us to kind of get used to one another last year. But yeah, you're right. The chemistry between Ryan and I has been real good. I'm really happy to be working with them again this season. And as long as we don't continue to stand next to one another in camera shots and make me look like a munchkin, I think we're good.
I noticed you guys did a little promo before the game, and I remember looking at the timeline on Twitter and seeing you guys set together. You were both on like high stools, and I was like, that's how Craig looks, like in the same frame as Ryan. There's no way.
Yeah. Well, I'm not short. I'm like 6 feet tall, but he's a legit 7 feet. He's a big dude. He really is. And he's still in tremendous shape. But yeah, you sometimes sort of, I guess I've been around this so long, and you're around all these players, and obviously once upon a time Yao Ming played here, so and he was truly a mountain, and now Boban is here, right? You kind of get used to being around giants, and then what the juxtaposition of that is when you sort of are in close proximity with them and they're not in uniform, they're just kind of in regular clothes, and then you realize exactly how big they really are. No, Ryan's terrific. I thought that we had a great season together a season ago, and looking forward to another good one this year. And as you mentioned, Ben, having Vanessa as part of the team. So I think we got a good group, got a great producer, great director. It'll be fun. I think this team's going to be super exciting, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how this continued sort of path that this franchise is on is going to take place. I will admit, the Rockets obviously have been a franchise that's won a ton of games year after year after year for 25, 30 years now. Only the Spurs have basically won more regular season games over the last quarter century than the Rockets have. So I know we're all sort of used to the Rockets winning. And when the Rockets were really good just 3 or 4 years ago, and you'd go in and you'd play a team that was on the back end of the standings, I always thought to myself, man, that's got to be really, really hard to call games for a team that just simply is not winning. I will admit it was very difficult 2 years ago, the transition season after James Harden was traded. That was pretty difficult. But since the vision has been sort of put forth, and you can see the vision and what they're attempting to do, obviously there's no guarantees of how this is going to ultimately turn out down the road. But now that you see the vision, the process, if you will, to steal Sam Hinkie's phrase or the Sixers fans' phrase with the process, I've been sort of re-energized with all of this. I find it a ton of fun to be a part of. Yes, there are going to be some rough patches that the team goes through because of their inexperience in their youth, but I find this experience far more enjoyable than I ever thought it would be if you asked me about this a handful of years ago.
As a quick follow-up to that, I saw that Monday night, the Heat game, y'all did the happy birthday, Ryan, for the broadcast because that happened to be his birthday. And he turned 38. I noticed that because his birthday year was 1984. That's also my birthday year. So I turned 38.
You're making me feel old, dude.
I know.
He's younger than Justin Verlander. That's crazy.
Jesus.
Yeah,
But
he's younger. He's younger than Haslam for the Heat, the OG.
oh, wow, I didn't even think about that. Yeah, he is.
I think he's what, 42 now.
Oh God. But the one thing I'll say, so Ryan just turned 38 years old. As someone that turned 38 myself, I cannot imagine having the energy to go through game prep, call a game with the energy that you guys do, and then hop on Twitter Spaces, which he did many times last season, back when Paulo was one of the guys doing the Rocket Spaces after the
Yeah.
games, and Ryan would be on there till like 1 a.m. And at 38, that blows my mind. That's just something even I don't have the energy to do. And he's, his job is even more intense than mine is. And he's doing that. I know, Craig, you tried the Spaces a couple of times, but I'm sure, like most people, it's hard to be that engaged after you put so much effort into the broadcast throughout the day. How in the world does Ryan have the energy to do all that?
He eats a lot.
Jesus.
Like,
Okay.
More than any other human I've ever seen. Like Matt Bullard ate a lot.
That explains it.
Matt Bullard ate a lot. Ryan blows away his food consumption. Ryan is a go out to eat, 2 salad, 2 soup, 2 entree, 2 dessert kind of guy.
Okay.
I don't know. Maybe that has something to do with it, but I think he just sort of just has a very outgoing personality. I mean, I think I have my greatest strength is my energy, but he's tremendously energetic. And to his credit, coming in as a complete outsider, with his hire being a surprise to many people, not having any ties whatsoever to the organization, whether previously as a player or as a coach or whatever, that's tough to sort of get people to accept you. And I think to his credit last year, that was probably his greatest accomplishment, was making people feel like he was, and he is, completely invested in the organization, in the fans, and sort of presenting a product that people can be happy about in terms of he's genuinely invested in what we're trying to do. And I think that was just, and I don't think anybody even gives it a second thought anymore that he hadn't played here or didn't coach here or anything. And I think that's probably what I think he should be extremely proud for accomplishing that in a very short amount of time, in a situation which at times can be very, very, very difficult for people to accept outsiders in these positions.
Absolutely. I think he's done a great job of that. And a lot of it to me is just how invested he seems, even on the broadcast. Not only the interaction with the fans, which has been fantastic, just on the broadcast, he seems so invested all the time. And for a young team, that's exactly what you want. There's a lot of young fans out there. And
the players like him, he knows everybody, like everyone. Seems, I mean, at some point, as he continues to do this and he gets older, he'll personally know less and less players because they'll eventually sort of work their way out of the league. But right now, he knows everybody. He played for 10 different teams, so he knows a ton of the coaches. He's always down there before games, not only talking with the Rockets, but talking with players and coaches from opposing teams and sort of giving some intel there. I've really, really enjoyed working with him.
So let me ask you one last question, which is,
Sure.
More to Craig Ackerman, the person, rather than just Rockets basketball related. I wanted to ask you, there's a lot of people, including me, and all of the, when I went to Houston, you saw how many people are in a similar position, who are, who love the Rockets and, are trying to grow as content creators, as, people in the Rockets community. If you could give, and this is a very cliche question, I know, if you could give one piece of advice to a younger Craig Ackerman, what would it be?
That's a good question. This is a tough business. In my perspective, you have to be in the right place at the right time. Obviously, you have to have some talent to be able to do this, but you also need a lot of people that believe in you, which is the case and was the case for me. People that gave you opportunities and chances to prove yourself. You don't succeed without that. I would think patience would probably be. I'm not a very patient person. I think my family would probably attest to that. And there were at times, as when I was younger and trying to continue to take steps, that the process for me was extremely frustrating. I think if there's one bit of advice that, as I look back at it now, that I would give myself was just be patient, but also be cognizant that this is a tough business. To broadcasting and media in general, a lot of things have changed now than where they were 25 years ago. Well, heck, this is my 29th season when I first started 29 years ago. The landscape of media has changed exponentially since then. But just patience and perseverance, and also simultaneously sort of the realization that it's hard to carve out a niche. It's hard to carve out a spot, especially one that allows you to make a living doing so.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. As someone that's not nearly as successful as you, but has slowly carved out a niche when it comes to Rockets and sports commentary, the main thing I would add is just find what your unique skill set is and really play to that. You talked about knowing your strengths, Craig, as a broadcaster, and the energy that you bring, especially to the play-by-play role. Whatever it is that you're trying to do, be it broadcasting, podcasting, writing, whatever form of media it may be, find your skill and really play into what your strengths are, because with everything becoming as niche as it is these days, it's hard to stand out. And so really trying to hone in on what you do best. It's less about being a jack of all trades, and it's more about really excelling in your lane. And I think that's something that, clearly you have a certain style as a broadcaster. And I think over the years, you've really honed in on what makes that unique, what makes that special. And that's what I would say to anybody young out there. Just find what makes you unique. And rather than try and be everything for everyone, just zone in on your lane and try and be the best version of yourself that you can be. I know that's cliche, but I think that makes sense.
And don't burn any bridges. It seems like it's this big, massive industry. It's not. Everybody knows everybody. Don't burn any bridges, no matter how much somebody pisses you off. That was that was when I first got into this, when I was 19 years old. That was one of the very first pieces of advice that I was given when I was 19. Don't burn any bridges, no matter how much somebody might piss you off.
And I'm guessing that's even more important now in the internet social media era, because everybody knows everybody even more now, right? Like you can't escape your past reputation.
Anything and everything now that you say and do, right, can turn into something that will ultimately end your journey and your career. So yes, very much so.
With that. Yeah, I think that's very good perspective, and not just on, the way it was 29 years ago, but the way it is right now, for sure. A lot of people have learned the hard way. And with that, I think we can end this podcast here before any of us gets in any trouble. No, I know we wouldn't, because this has been a really useful podcast that I think has covered a lot of ground on so many different subjects. Craig, thank you so much for the time.
Anytime. Thanks for having me, Paulo. Congratulations, my man.
Thank you.
And folks, thank you for listening. This is where we will break. If you're not already following either Craig or Paulo on Twitter, I strongly encourage you to do so. Craig is on there at CA_Rockets. Paulo on there at Paulo Alves NBA. And by the way, this show, The Logger Line, brought to you by Clutch the Lager of Carback Brewing. It now has a Twitter handle as well, at The Logger Line. That's where you can find episodes, and also our link tree to where you can find this and any other episode in our archives on your listening platform of choice, be it iTunes, Google, Spotify, Amazon, whatever it may be. Hit up the link tree at The Logger Line and you can find that. For Craig and Paulo, I'm Ben DuBose. You can follow me on Twitter at Ben DuBose. And you can also read my content in Rockets Wire. That's rocketswire.usatoday.com, USA Today's blog covering the Houston Rockets. With that, we'll wrap up. Again, thanks to Craig and Paulo for taking the time. Thanks to you for listening. And please come back soon for another new episode of The Logger Line.
Thanks, guys.